So my background, for those that don't know me, I'm a general dentist by clinical training, have been so for a decade. I do have 5 practices located in Jersey City. I'm a pretty silent partner. I don't clinically practice anymore. I've really spent the last 18 years in the startup world. First in tech, then health tech at a company called Oscar Health, then in oral tech at a company called Quip, and then after that into oral health investing, where I've been ever since. First at my own family office, the Barchester Bay Group, where I have about 40 ventures under management, and then at Revere Partners, whereas I just said we have 24, soon to be 28 under management. So I've learned a lot over that time. For every one of the success stories that are in there, Oscar IPOing, Quip being where it is today, they each come with many failures behind them. So one of my goals in this talk is to maybe help you guys all avoid perhaps 1 or 2 of those bumps, bruises, even broken bones that I've experienced over my time, just in some of the success and really also some of the failure where I think we learn the most. All right, so in terms of, in talking about putting this together, I wanted to deliver 5 really important things that you can be doing, 5 strategies that can really help to address this growing area of technology. And we all know it's growing, right? A lot of you are road warriors that I see at all these events. Obviously, we see the room of sponsors continuing to grow, new ones showing up, right? So how can we address this in the world of, right, especially in the DSO world where there's a real focus on operations and on the way that a DSO and private equity operates? How can we infuse technology into that without it being additional and unnecessary noise and distracting us, right? How can we make those high value decisions? So hopefully this leaves you with some of that. I want to go over what I believe to be a tech evaluation process. That's how you assess your practice's needs, technology capabilities, and match them, right? It's really a cultural question. Right? Does your organization have a culture of being innovative and being technology adoptive or not? Right? And how do you make that transition if you want to? There's a tech pilot process, right? This is how we roll up our sleeves and actually get into the technology itself, right? How do we structure a pilot, implement that technology, follow through after it? Then there's the top technology categories, right? It's hard to really operate within this space of technology if you don't have a map. Right? Otherwise, you're traveling, sort of guideless. And then there are synergies within each of those categories, right? How do each of those technologies within that map, within those sectors, interplay or not interplay? How are they, that question of interoperability that we keep stumbling on in dentistry? And then the last question, ownership, right? We're very obsessed with the walls and the roof and the patient roster of our practices. But how do we also take value, capture upside in the technology that moves right through it? Right? We think about this in our home lives. You don't just own your home, you own everything in it. When you're using something like you have an iPhone and AirPods and an Apple Watch and a MacBook, you might invest in Apple, right? But we don't really necessarily think that same way in the dental practice, right? But our doctors do, and change management's a big thing, and motivation is a big thing, and leading by influence versus authority, as I learned from somebody very wise in the room this morning, is a big thing. And so we need to think about that in terms of our tech and how it can help us get there. So the first piece is the technology evaluation process. So for context, Revere, we've actually developed an entirely separate corporate services arm of the company that serves organized dentistry. Our largest DSOs, manufacturers, insurers, et cetera, help them to leverage the value out of the oral technology that we're tracking. We have over 500 companies in our pipeline. We put them through this extensive 26-point diligence process, so we know an awful lot about a lot of the technology that's in the space. How can we make that valuable for a practice? Well, the first thing is starting with you, right? Starting with what's going on right now, whether that's central in terms of how you operate at a corporate level, or it's on a practice level, whether that's regional or local. Every organization operates differently. But figuring out what are your key opportunities and key challenges, right? So we go through an initial call process, right, with our team. We talk through some of those challenges. We understand from a practice, what is it that's going on? We provide the current technology. We understand what is the software that you're using, right? What is your tech stack? What is the software? What is the consumables? What are the equipment, right? What is it that you're using in your practice? And where is it successful and where is it challenged? The next area is assessment. right? Taking our heads up from that technology stack now that we understand it, and looking at and how is that helping us reach our KPIs in a year. If our goal is to crush this number 1, 2, and 3 KPI, is our technology enabling us to do that, or is it not best suited to do so? We then present solutions, right? This is where the Revere sort of special sauce comes in, but others in the space do as well. We'll look at our knowledge, our data, our tech stack, and say, what do we think can help you integrate better, collapse 3 solutions into one, hit a KPI better, right? Whatever that is for your DSO organization. And then we report, right? And put those matches together, right? We say, here are your key challenge areas that you've told us about. Here's how you're addressing them with the technology that you currently have in your practice. Putting those 2 things together, here are the technology solutions that we think could better hit your KPIs over where you're currently at, right? So look, this is an organized tech evaluation process, but it doesn't run by itself. It runs with people who are motivated to put these things in place, right? So make no mistake, living behind this well-organized process is a culture within that organization that will adopt this type of change, that will aggressively look at these technologies, that will put this as a top priority among its people at all levels of the organization. So the next step in the process, now that you've done sort of a self-introspective process of what the technology systems are, what's working, what's not working, now it's time to pick, right? Now it's time to get real about what couple of technologies you really want to test, right? So the first bit of that is the structure, is the picking, right? First of all, is which of those technologies will really, hit your KPI the hardest, right? And choose them and be really selective, right? You might have a tech stack of 20, 30, 40, 50 different things, right? You've identified, a key set of areas through the technology evaluation process. And of those, 10 key areas, you probably now are picking 2, maybe 3 tops. To really push on and test on first. Right? Then the second bit of structure, besides the picking, is to actually structure an LOI, an MOU. These are not meant to be contractually binding agreements, but really meant to be more of a statement of work, right? That outlines what exactly needs to be tested, what practices, and who in those practices are accountable and responsible for this. What's the length of time that it's going to be tested over 30, 60, 90 days in order to gain you conviction and being real about what it's going to take to convince internal decision makers and your doctors. Number 3, what is it going to cost, for example, right? And there are more elements to these agreements, but those are some of the key ones that need to be called out up front, right? Then there's the implementation. Right, phase 1, getting those people, now that you have this structure, getting those people whose names are listed in that document, who've put their name next to it, to actually begin to implement this technology. The first thing usually starts with access, right, and outlining what those people are going to do on a day-to-day basis to test this thing, different from what they normally do. In our case, if the organization is not able to dedicate its own bandwidth or enough of its own bandwidth to handle it, we have an implementation team that will actually go through the process of kind of hand-holding the practice as to not distract from your day-to-day business and ensure that the technology can be tested appropriately. And then there's follow-through. Now the pilot has run its course. It's 30, 60, 90 days. You have some results. You analyze those results. What then happens, right? That all of the technology evaluation, all of the tech pilot process is for nothing if you don't take a hard look at those results and decide what to do about them, right? The answer may be to not move forward with that technology or this area at all. It may be to look at a different technology because this one didn't work the way you thought it would. It might be to move forward with this technology. There's one of many outcomes here, but you need to follow through on what was there. Don't let the momentum die, right? That's how good deals die on not so big hills. Okay, so in terms of technology categories, I mentioned before, we have to map the space. It's a complicated space. It's large. There's over 500 just applying to Revere. There are many more beyond that, and especially if you're looking globally, which we do, there's even more beyond that, right? So you have to map the space. I've only put a very kind of preliminary set of areas here to consider. Each of them have several subdivisions, as you can see. So technology and SaaS are a big area of startups that we see. That includes everything from AI and supply chain to SaaS and marketplace and B2B technologies. You look at the consumer brand space, also is large, aesthetics and membership structures and in-a-box solutions. You look at dental services or biotech, devices, therapeutics, aligners, implants, right? A lot of things fit into this bucket. Payments and reimbursement. This might be the most commonly produced word at this conference that I heard, which I love the fact that it's getting a spotlight, is fintech or RCM, revenue cycle management. A huge problem in the general practitioner space that we need to be talking about more, and especially its interoperability. Right, the ortho side of the industry with OrthoFi and OrthoBank have done a little bit of a better job organizing themselves. The procedures on average are much more expensive, right? But we still have a lot of those same problems on the GP side, and it's much bigger and it's much more disparate, right? It's much more fragmented here. So that area is an enormous area that we're seeing. Two other categories, for example, that are not listed here: oral systemic health links, big area that is receiving more and more focus. Another one is access to care and diagnostics, another big area. How do we detect caries? How do we detect problems? Be more proactive and minimally invasive, rather than reactionary. I mentioned Revere's portfolio companies. We don't generally disclose a lot of this publicly, but in the spirit of trying to deliver you something high value to walk away with here, I want to show you some of the choices that we've made. So these are, I think, actually 23 of our 24 companies, or 22. There are a couple of logos that are new that have not been added here. Two of those would be Tooth Fairy, which fits in the fintech bucket. Another one would be Twice, which fits in the consumer square, which is not pictured here. But these are some of our most recent and compelling choices. We've had an exit around Brick Built. That's what we call a true diagnostic. And I'll talk about that area in a moment. But here are some of the ways that we kind of map the big growth areas, at least from a venture perspective in dental. Software is a big area for us. Fintech and RCM, as we've talked about multiple times, and I'll show you how we kind of map it and are thinking about the investments in that space. Scientific and clinical, that's that biotech space, right? Imaging and treatment planning and design is another. Teledentistry is a third, and ortho is a big area as well. Again, this is not fully comprehensive. As I mentioned, that consumer products piece is not even on here. But here are some of the ways that we're thinking about it from an investment perspective. Revere has about 80 DSO partners, always looking for more to kind of serve with oral technology information and to partner with our portfolio companies, and about a 75-person team to handle the type of deal flow and action that we have. So the next kind of deliverable that I wanted to have here was within inside of that map, the areas in dentistry in general, and then the areas that we have decided to invest in. How now is the interoperability within those areas? In other words, in your organization, when you have a few technologies in play, how do you get them to interact? Right? It's sort of like a fish tank, right? Where if you have kids or remember from being a kid, you have this fish tank and you go to the store and you're kind of asking them, what fish can I put in the tank with the other fish, right? And your kids are saying, well, that one's pretty and I like how big that one is, right? But on the other hand, the person at the pet store is telling you, well, if you put that one in, it's going to devour the others right in front of your face. And while some kids may go for that, if you're anything like my brothers that I grew up with, that may be the case, but that's not going to fly in your dental office when it's real patients and real care being delivered, right? So you have to consider, not just having one piece of a puzzle, right? But how does that piece fit into the other pieces? Do you have them existing? Do you need new ones? Or how does it work together? So that's my goal in a couple of these areas of synergy, and I'll point it out for you. So in fintech, the way we dissect it is into 4, maybe 5 buckets. The fifth one's not really listed here. Those 4 buckets would be payments. How does the patient pay? Right? Patient financing. How are they going to afford the care? Then we go to insurance verification. How do we stop that front desk from spending anywhere near an hour or 2 hours on the phone, making an average of only 5 outbound calls a day during the pandemic and only 8 prior to the pandemic, which are astronomical numbers? How do we make that a seamless and integrated technology process? And then claims processing, right? Okay, I've sent a claim off. How much am I going to get paid? Where did it go? Did it go to a clearinghouse, a TPA? What even is a TPA, right? Making sure that this process is tracked through and through. The fifth bucket that's not really listed here that we are thinking about is credentialing, right? How are the dentists credentialed to all the carriers and the policies that they need to be credentialed within? Even the question of how do you get a dental professional credentialed in the medical space for certain procedures is a lot of questions there, and so it's just not ready. It's not game time ready for this slide, but it is a fifth area within this bucket. So here's how we've decided to address it. We've invested in FeatherPay, a company that brings flexibility to the types of payments that a consumer demands to the dental office. Choice Payment Systems is one of several financing solutions that we've looked at. Founders are excellent. They founded Healthcare Finance Direct, if you know anything about them before, and are able to basically offer people with 500 FICO score and above some type of solution, right? Rather than just 700 and above and declining 70-80% of those that apply. That's not a solution, right? Zoob is taking a look at insurance verification, right? How can we make it a seamless process where you understand what the patient's rate, first of all, are they eligible or not eligible and in good standing? Second of all, what is that rate sheet? Third of all, what limitations exist on that rate sheet, right? Having rich information to give to the patient so that the dental office doesn't have this crazy business model of spend all this money to acquire the customer, have them sit down for an appointment, tell them that they have a lot of work to be done that's expensive and painful, send them away for 3 weeks, and then try to bring them back in. That's wild. Nobody in other industries understands that, right? Unless you're in healthcare. That business model is not sustainable, right? And doesn't meet the current demands of consumers. And frankly, even our technology is better than that, right? So there's the reason for Zoob and other investments that we've made in that space, like AirPay and like Tooth Fairy. And then claims processing. Probably the best known player in the space and who's doing an excellent job there is Zentist. Now, not all of these are necessarily Revere investments, and Zentist is not. But this is an area where you have to have coverage, right? And their Remit AI solution is somewhere that brings end-to-end claims tracking. There's also others in the room who I've just met during this conference that are doing this or addressing this problem, and others that you've heard on stage talk about this issue and how they're solving it. So a critical area. Together, we believe that by making synergistic investments in areas like this, we can put together a comprehensive solution that we ensure the pieces talk together. I'm going to go through the others a little bit more quickly, but microbiome dissected includes patient education. What's going on in that patient's mouth? Who are the bad actors, right? True diagnostics. Of those bacteria, for example, that are bad actors, who are the top 5 and in what quantity are they in that patient's mouth? Precision therapeutics and a delivery platform. So Keystone Bio, for example, saying we have a therapeutic that eradicates P. gingivalis, right? The propagator of periodontitis as well as Alzheimer's disease. And twice, here's a brand forward, oral wellness forward oral care product company, right? Lenny Kravitz's company. And we can deliver these therapeutics through those products, toothpaste, mouthwash, gum, etc. And then ongoing monitoring. How do we tell how the patient's mouth is doing on an ongoing basis? Temperature, pH, and about a dozen other biometrics that span everything from oral cancer to diabetes. And Lura Health and their sensors that go in the mouth, that kind of wearable, ongoing movie that they're creating of biometrics is critical. So a couple of other areas dissected. Ortho is a massive area for us. We have a lot of orthodontic, both investors as well as portfolio companies. How do you bring the GP and the ortho together more closely? Well, or even the orthodontic associate closer to the orthodontist, right? You need a platform to do that. That's two-front, right? Ensuring that complex case management is handled by the right professionals. Then, what is it, by influence in your organizations, not by authority, but what are the aligner platforms? There's 40, 50, 60 aligner platforms out there. Which one should they use? Why? What does their organization think? Here's an example, OrthoFX actually has a unique material, actually has unique software, actually helped bring the patient in as well, right? Built off of the top executives at Align for many, many years that left and know the industry quite well. What's your patient management system here? I could have said monitoring, but I purposely did not. what is the patient management system going forward, right? What tells the patient, to switch aligners at the right time? What tells the patient if their retainer is working in their mouth, right? What is the system there that allows your practice to be efficient from a workflow and operational throughput perspective with chair time and gives the patient the demand that they need? As a kid going through orthodontics, we went like once a month, and I had for 3 years. That once a month for 3 years is a lot of visits, right? To expect somebody to go to the dentist, 40 times across 3 years is a pretty high expectation today, right? And then retention. Who's going to serve them with that retainer? The orthodontist gives you one, right? But it's sort of an annoyance in their business model, right? They don't make a huge margin. It's difficult for them to keep up with, keeping that retainer on the mouth. So you almost need a dedicated solution to that, like Retainer Club. Implantology, another area. How can you, analyze the face and, design the entire treatment, not just one tooth, the entire treatment from end to end? Smilify does everything from the top of the funnel sales all the way through to designing the STL file that you need to enable the patient's mouth to look like that. Augmented, holographic in the air. It's planning, surgical planning, and guidance, right? Literally in a hologram in the air, you can see where the inferior alveolar nerve is, and you can see where your implant planning is, and you can line them up. You are drilling in the mouth and looking at the IAN in real value, right, in real time. Then you need the bone to be present and the implant to be stable within it, right? How do you do that? Cometa Bio is an easy example. Autograft solution. Never seen anything like it, and yes, case selection is important, but it works, right? And not only that, it works better than xenografts and other types of synthetic materials. You're literally using the patient's own healthy tissue, the tooth, as the bone solution in the patient's mouth. And then for stability, Rev Bio, right? Here's a company that is literally a super glue in the mouth, right? That's not moisture sensitive. No better way to stabilize that implant. Huge issue is peri-implantitis with implants. Lots of recall into the office. Tons of money spent on that, usually eaten by the practice, right? And then last but not least, implant selection. Again, like ortho, you can't tell the docs only use this, right? It takes away that clinical autonomy that makes them want to stay within your organization, right? So give them choices. Give them even new choices. Educate, right? Influence. Identical is a solution that literally prints a tooth that's identical to the tooth that came out. They scanned it, and now you put it back into a healthy socket. It's really, really neat. Or MagDent, a solution that is literally using, this sounds weird, but an electromagnetic field. The patient doesn't feel anything in their mouth, but helps that bone grow much more quickly, right? Getting away from this year-long implant process of removing the tooth and then doing a graft and then letting that heal and then a healing abutment and letting that heal and then loading it and letting that heal. That's 9 to 12 months, right? Into the world of direct implants, but how to do it more efficiently, right? And that saves you money as an organization. So last but not least, how can you capture the upside of tech? All this cool tech that we've learned about how to evaluate in our practice, we've learned about how to pilot in our practice. We then, have mapped the different areas, understand the synergy within those areas. Now you're all hopefully hyped up on tech. How do we capture the upside of that, right? And not just the tech companies, right? Because you're a huge part of their success, so you should have a hand in it, right? Well, first of all, think about being an investor. Individuals can invest now into the venture space within dental, right? There are options to make angel or venture investments. Think about doing that, right? In terms of change, if your doctors own a piece of the technology, that change management process is easier. You've probably all, from the vendor side in this room as well as the DSO side of this room, have heard the pushback from doctors to say, and the staffing issues, to say that, I don't want a new thing. Even though it saves us a little bit of money, I don't want to train somebody on how to use this other thing. Why do I need another workflow? It's a different conversation when they own a piece of it than when you just put it in place and tell them to use it. Right? And then retention. How do you keep your doctors and your people that do a really great job for you day in and day out? Some of them have ownership in the practice, some don't. You have different models out there. They can have ownership in the tech too, right? And there are ways to do this, and Revere has examples of this. There are other companies out there that have examples. Candid Pro did a really interesting thing. If you're a customer of Candid Pro, and you invest into the company, and there's an open SPV, not only do you become a shareholder of the company, but your lab fees change. You get upgraded immediately to gold status. And yes, there's volume discounts for DSOs too, right? This should be more the norm and not an exception. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming to the conference.